Hey everybody, today's day 18, I think. Yep, it's day 18. I had a rough night last night. I had to work until almost 2:30. So today I'm going to talk about something that's kind of out there again. They're called the Archons, which is the Gnostic word for rulers. And the Gnostics, they were a belief system. And they went out into other realities, and every time they seemed to get a foothold and got their that their point was getting across, their message was coming across, they were slaughtered en masse. They're the ones that ran the Great Library of Alexandria that was destroyed by the Roman Church in 415, and the Roman Church took some of the scrolls that they liked, but destroyed all the ancient knowledge of the past, just like we're doing right now in Libya and Syria, destroying history of the past, that we can create a fake past, just like in George Orwell's book 1984. So the Gnostics were very interesting people, and the thing was nobody knew what they believed until a very lucky find in Nag Hammadi, Egypt. In 1945, they found a sealed jar of Gnostic writings that have been hidden. They estimate sometime around 400 AD, which kind of coincides with the destruction of the Library of Alexandria. And the good thing was it had not been edited, it had not been tampered with. It had been sitting in a sealed jar for roughly 1,550 years or so. And when they took it out and they read it, 1/5 of these texts talk about something called the Archons, which they called a fake god, and created something they called Hal, or the world we see today, which is described in their language of the day as a computer simulation, a fake reality, etc. And that was that Saturn moon matrix I was talking about yesterday. And they said that the Archons were robotic, cyborg-like creatures who create illusions, make things appear that are not there. They're said to be made from luminous fire. The pre-Islamic and Islamic said the jinn are made from smokeless fire. There's a lot of common themes. And these Archons have what's known as the Lord Archon, or the Demiurge, which resembles the Old Testament God in the Bible, where he killed people for literally no reason sometimes, or just really stupid, egotistical reasons. And they said that the Demiurge is the one that created this fake reality. And before that, we would lived in a much higher frequency range, the upper eons, as they're called by the Gnostics, and we now live in what's called the lower eons, which is basically just a low vibrational state. It's a interesting concept. And like I said, these people went way out there. They used psychoactive potions and other medicinal herbs to see way beyond the programmed reality that we all experience. And they said that this archontic force can take form either as a reptile or as like a gray unformed fetus creature, which represents the gray aliens with dark unmoving eyes. So they were talking about this way back in 400 AD and before that, about the aliens and visitors and whatnot, and that they were controlling our world through artificial intelligence and a fake world, fake reality. So it really confirms a lot of the things that I'd been studying at the time when I came across the Gnostic belief system and how they talk about all these different things. And there are these certain families that have more of the archontic DNA. Those are the most psychopathic people for the most part. And they are like the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, people like that. And they feed off of fear and death rather than life and the natural order of love. So that's why ever since the beginning of civilization, they would sacrifice young virgins to the gods, which young virgins was just code for children because they love the energy of children before puberty. Why is that? Well, Carlos Castaneda said something along the lines of when a baby is born, he has a shining coat of energy around him like a shrink wrap kind of thing, and it's all through his whole body. But once you get to an adult, there's just a tiny fringe on the bottom of your feet to the toe. But I'm sure some people who are more aware have more energy. But basically, when people go through puberty, we see it as a hormonal change, but these archontic entities see it as a electromagnetic or information wave change. So that is why they have pedophile rings and sick things that go on that are beyond our comprehension. For example, Father George Bush is one of the most infamous child rapists and killers. Ted Heath and the British. He abused and killed tons of boys. And I'm suggesting that these people are highly possessed by these archontic entities. And some of them are even been known to shapeshift. And if you think the world is solid, yeah, shapeshifting is impossible. But if the world is basically information fields and holographic illusions, you can easily change what's on the projector, the information waves, to create a different image. And there's tons of stories of George H.W. Bush turning into a reptilian-like creature. But Ted Heath, a woman, actually saw him turn into a reptilian at some ritual they were doing while walking by. And she almost didn't want to tell anyone until someone she was talking with mentioned that he'd been hearing from a lot of people that all these people told him that they seen people turn into lizards. And she like clutched her chest. She was like, "Oh my God, I wasn't gonna say this to you because I thought you might think I was crazy. She was telling him about the rituals that went on with Ted Heath around her neck, but she didn't want to talk about him shapeshifting. She didn't want people to think that she was crazy. There are a lot of those who are simply born into this bloodline, and that's why the royal families they interbred incessantly with other royal bloodlines, because they have that reptilian hybrid DNA, which is actually talked about in the Bible of all places. The sons of God bred with the daughters of men, and they bear children. There were giants in those days. There's this passage, I can't remember the exact wording of it, but really is in all in the ancient world, there are statues to reptilian entities. There are a lot of statues of reptilians eating humans. If you go look around that, and that's another reason why they're destroying history. They don't want this stuff to be seen. But there's just a bunch of ancient drawings, and if you look it up on Google, you'll see like all this reptilian. And like 70,000 years ago in China, someone claimed the divine right to rule due to their descendants from the serpent god. And all these bloodlines came from around the same place, around, I think it was Mesopotamia, that area, and of course Egypt. People are wondering how they built those pyramids, when in all likelihood we could not build them today. They definitely had help. That or they had terrible slavery. But and if you notice all the monuments and whatnot, they all are on vortex points on the earth, and they're all meant to mute the morphic field. That's where they do their rituals, their Satanistic rituals, because Satanism is a huge part of this Archontic bloodline, and there are Archons in the other dimension who are feeding off these rituals, and it is lowering the vibration of the morphic fields of the earth, as an Australian Satanist once said. And the children in Australia are just put in the wilderness, while in America and Britain and whatnot, these people either own crematoriums or know people that do, won't ask any questions. They simply just burn up the victims. And you look at how many children go missing each year. It's nothing compared to what you see on the TV news. There are at least tens of thousands that go missing in America each year, many of them in foster care, which is why there's this large push to take away children for dubious reasons, and then have them quickly adopted by somebody else, probably somebody in the web of abusing and the archontic possession, if you would, because those that have the hybrid bloodlines, they're much easier to take over, and that's why they rule the world, most of them, because they are obsessed with hierarchy and control over others. And we all have what's known as our reptilian brain. It's the most primitive part of our brain. It's the thing that has us react without thinking. Like if somebody runs in front of our car, we slam on the brakes and stuff like that. It has its uses. But I would suggest that before we were genetically messed with through whatever means it was, and some to a bigger extent than others, like the hybrids I just talked about. the reptilian brain was either not there or much smaller than it is now. And Carl Sagan, famous cosmologist, now deceased, wrote a wonderful book called The Dragons of Eden. And he was writing about the reptilian brain and its effect on the whole of humanity and whatnot. Fascinating read. Guy knew a lot more than he was saying, which, it goes with the territory where if you want to be on TV, you can't reveal too many secrets, but it's a great read. I really recommend it. He's talking about reptilian genetics in there as well and how it's affected us, not just the reptilian brain. Really puts things in more perspective. And like I said, I like to get my information from various sources, not just one, which is why I read and do a lot of research on these types of things. But there are a few people that talk about this stuff a lot more and are often ridiculed for this type of talk because it's so outlandish, it seems out of hand. And I understand that to a point, saying that some of our leaders are possibly shape-shifting, interdimensional, alien, lizards, whatever. But if you look at the ancient world and you look at personal accounts of people who have seen this stuff kind of happen in front of their faces, and there's a great video on YouTube, I think it's called Revelations of a Mother Goddess, where David Icke interviews someone named Arizona Wilder. I'm pretty sure it took place in the mid-1990s. It was a great interview. She was part of an elite MK Ultra project called Project Monarch. And she was also sort of like a broodmare for that project. And another woman is Kathy O'Brien, who wrote the book Transformation of America. Trance, TRANCE dash formation. And she was involved in MK Ultra. And she saw some pretty insane things as well, to the layman at least. But when you look at this world in the way that it actually is as a energetic information field, rather than being solid, as we perceive it, the possibilities for things become much wider. Now, the Archons, they feed off of fear. And that is why we have all these wars. The media keeps us in fear. There's always something new coming out about to be afraid of today. Even the teasers for the news, it's like something you're looking at right now could blind your children. Find out at 11. And it's just this fear-based motivation and fear-based, and of course, keeping us in survival mode. Another thing they like. Quiet weapons for quiet, silent wars, or silent, whatever the hell it was called. This document that they found inside of a copier in the 80s said, keep the people busy, busy, busy down on the farm with the other animals. And this also coincides with the theory that humans probably, for the most part, don't belong on this planet because of what we've done to it. And most people have participated in the total destruction of the planet. Whereas before this hijack of our reality, we lived in harmony with other animals, and it's reminiscent of the Garden of Eden type of way of living. And the garden symbolizes our heart society. I don't believe the whole Adam and Eve thing, who had two sons. And then how did they have more kids? Did their sons have sex with their mother? I mean, doesn't make any sense. But the whole image of the garden is something similar to what Ibn Alexander described in the book Proof of Heaven. After he was brain dead from spinal meningitis or bacterial meningitis, actually. He his brain had literally shut off, and he was dead except for being on life support. And he saw a world that had much more vibrant colors and much more wider perspective, visually, auditorily, and a lot of joy and lovingness. And it's a great image of what people would call heaven. I suggest is simply the natural world, natural order world, the upper eons, as they're called by the Gnostics. And that's the world that we can all go back to if we all raise our consciousness and become streetwise in our spirituality. And I like that term, streetwise spirituality, because it's not being all, all airy-fairy. It's being noticing what's going on in the world, but also realizing that it's still just, an experience. But to make it into a better experience, raising our consciousness to the point where we see ourselves as infinite possibility, infinite awareness, infinite whatever, just infinite in general, we can transform this world back, because once we break out of the programming that starts from birth all the way until most people die, get up, go to work, come home, watch TV, get up, go to work. It's a vicious cycle from which we rarely emerge, as Carlos Castaneda's book said. I think it was Don Juan Matus. It's a feedback loop, basically. You got to break the chain of that feedback loop to get away from under the control of the archontic entities and become more loving and compassionate and empathetic. And there are a number of ways to do this, but using your heart more, listening to your intuition, loving one another, do unto others as you would have done to yourself. Things like that are really going to change the way that, because if we drop fear from our lives. Someone once said, fear is an acronym for false emotion appearing real. And I think it was Roosevelt who said, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And that's very true, because fear is the mind killer. Fear is the thing that gets us trapped in a box. And I'd rather have a world where fear is no longer an issue, because it would let people be able to express themselves the way they want to without the biggest prison we all live in, at least most people live in, the fear of what other people think of them, which is always holding people back. And it's not always, what would the president think? What would this person think? It's always, what will my mother think? What will my friends think? What will my family think about me talking about this or that, or doing this or that? I mean, I've already passed that plateau. I wouldn't be talking about this if I cared about what other people, if I was scared about what other people thought about me and thought about what I say and what I'm doing, because there is ample evidence to show that what I'm saying has a lot of truth to it. And whether or not you believe it is fine. I'm not asking you to believe anything. I mean, but if you actually do your own research and look at the evidence, which I highly suggest you do when it comes to especially things dealing with conspiracies and how the world is really, really run, how the world really works, you're going to find some things out and you're going to realize that the world is not the way you thought it was, and that it is run by definitely non-human entities. Because if you really think about it, why would we be destroying our own home planet? It's not us that's doing it. It's the possession of these elites, as they think they are, who are helping to destroy the planet. Those without empathy or compassion, or what we really do need. I'm not saying we really need leaders if we have the right consciousness as a planet, but right now, I think we need more compassionate leaders, more empathetic leaders, and there's very few out there. I mean, Bernie Sanders seemed pretty empathetic, great guy, charismatic, and a guy like Dennis Kucinich, who is he does care a lot about people, but he's not charismatic. He's not very popular. But we need people like that can transform the world and not give in because of fear due to the demands of the people that got you elected as president, who are willing to even sacrifice themselves in order to create a better world, much like JFK did, refusing to do the Bay of Pigs and refusing to do other things and trying to repeal the Federal Reserve Act. And so you see what happens. Usually what happens when people try to do good, they get stopped. A lot of the great people who have told us to love one another and don't be afraid ever. It's just a ride. It's just an illusion. Don't worry about it. Just love one another. People have told us that, gotten a bullet right in their head. Martin Luther King, Bobby Kennedy, all these people who are going to change the world. And that just shows how scared this Archontic force and their gophers are of human beings living the way they once did, with no fear, no guilt, no shame, no negative emotions, except in certain circumstances where you're grieving a loved one or whatever. I feel like the world could be such a paradise, and what we've turned it into is more like I don't know what you'd call it. It's a polluted wasteland, or at least getting there. And we all need to stop allowing these things to happen. And if we all came together and en masse went down to the White House or Parliament or whatever, and we all just stopped complying with these ludicrous freedom destroying laws and people who tell us what to do, because there are so few of them and we are many. There's a thing on YouTube called the tiny dot. It shows how little people are in control of our lives, on the surface at least, when we're the ones who are actually in control, because there are less than 1 million people in America who try to control us all, and we are 320 million. And the video really illustrates this very well. And it shows just how our power is within us, and all we have to do is take our power back, because 320 million people versus a handful, relatively, can only happen if we acquiesce to their insane laws and keep cooperating. I do believe civil disobedience is the strongest tool of resistance practiced by Martin Luther King. Henry David Thoreau is the one I think who came up with it. And it's a great concept where there's no violence, but you just say, we're not having it. We're not doing it. If they come down from Washington, D.C. or Downing Street or whatever country you live in, wherever they have the Capitol building, they say, we've decided we're going to do this. And what if all the people just said, no, we're not doing it? There's no power there. So there is a way out of this, even though there is a lot of bad things going on in the world. We need to develop a backbone and a heart-centered awareness, and we will change the world. I really do believe that. And once you get to a certain vibration, the archontic force, the reptilian, whatever force you want to call it, they can't get to us, because it's like we're on radio 1, they're on radio 2, that we will never meet. So the whole idea of this video is, in order to become freer, raising your consciousness is the way out, and that nothing has any power over us once we reclaim our true power. Not even the archontic force that has controlled humanity for thousands of years, at least since when the moon came in. But once we realize illusions only have power over us when we believe they do, we will overcome. We will become one with all, and the world will become a paradise. And that's my vision for the world. Love and compassion and generosity and empathy and all these positive emotions. I'm going to close on a Native American saying, inside of each of us lives 2 wolves. One is fear, guilt, shame, cowardice, greed, all those negative emotions. The other one is love, compassion, empathy, gratitude, and all the other positive emotions. And then the question is, which wolf wins? The one you feed the most. So I'll leave you with that today. I think the video is getting towards 35 minutes, my longest one so far. But I just want to let you know it's not hopeless. You can get out of this. And I really am seeing it happen more often. I do believe that it will happen within my lifetime. So raise your vibration, raise your emotional system, get away from fear, move towards love. We will all become the great people and great spirits that we are supposed to be. Thank you very much for listening and watching. I will talk to you tomorrow about something I haven't decided yet. Great day.